Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very sorry I couldn't come in person. I would have loved to meet everyone. So we are making a presentation on rock art and tourists in lessons from Zimbabwe. And I wish I had listened to other people's presentations. Maybe I could have infused something in my presentation. But so I will just talk about what we had. I personally think that Zimbabwe provides a very good platform to learn for the Southern African region, especially when it relates to post-colonial experiences, mainly because of how we, as Zimbabwe, we have experienced tourism and archaeology, and of course that includes the rock art. I don't know if my PowerPoint is moving, Melanie. It's not moving this side. Now it's moving. Okay. So as I was saying, that in terms of history of rock art and tourism, we have had a long period of experience, I think. This historical timeline is showing how we, from the beginning of people who can call tourists coming into the country from the 16th century, we have somewhere in the 1899 got colonized, and by 1930 we had an institution that looked after rock art and archaeology and heritage related science. And then that was the colonial period. Then we had the 1980 our independence. So that's when started the post-colonial period. We had a very successful period from the 1980s. Very few tourists were coming into the country, but by the year 2000, we had almost kicked in the tourists that we received. But of course, after 2000, because of economic, political instability that rocked the tourism sector a lot. And since then, we have had some experience where we have improved the way in which we present our sites, and until to date, we are on the point of recovery. So in terms of the approach, I think during the colonial period and probably 10, 20 years into the post-colonial period, tourism, especially related to rock art, was not very emphasized. What institutions that look after the heritage were looking at was mostly conservation, conserving the sites and putting in legislation that restricted access. And during the colonial period, access to sites was actually restricted because there was no belief that Africans could be tourists. And that, of course, entrenched the belief that tourism is related to Europeans rather than Africans. So when we move to the post-colonial period, I think the other lesson that came in with post-colonial period is in terms of shifting priorities, whereby the priority, of course, was to conserve the sites and present them to the public, but there were greater priorities than that, whereby you see the allocation of resources is dependent on the priority. And Rokat and other heritage places were not high up on the priorities. So there were budget cuts and so on. But I believe it took a lot of time for heritage practitioners to shift their focus from just mere conservation and preservation issues to look at tourism as something that can provide towards the conservation and improving the resources that are available. Then, as I said before, because rock art and tourism and archaeology were considered elitist. With the coming in of independence, you find that there is a gap between the people who access the sites, who were accessing the sites before, and those who are supposed to access the sites. And now the majority of the people were not really used to accessing the sites, but other barriers were in terms of academic literature. There was a lot of academic literature generated, but very little that presented the sites to the public per se. And I think this is still a problem because you find that a lot of people live with sites, archaeological sites, local sites in their vicinity, but they don't have any written material or any recourse to knowing more about the sites themselves. So this, I believe, was an experience, and it's an experience that probably most post-colonial African countries experience. Then the issue of nature versus culture. I think this is a well-known issue across especially Southern Africa, where we have nature tourism dominating over the cultural tourism. So you find, for example, that in national parks, national parks get more visitors than cultural sites. And this has been the same for the past many years. I am showing here a graph for the last, for 2024, 2023. You can still see that national parks which are in blue are still getting a lot more visitors than national museums and monuments, and that includes the sites under national museums and monuments. And for 2023, for 2024, there is actually, according to the statistics that are available, there is actually a decline in visitation to the a 10% decline in visitation to the national museums and monuments, whereas there is a 5% rise in terms of the visitation to national. Still something. I think this is a reality. Nature, by whatever definition, is attracting more visitors than cultural sites. Then I think in terms of lessons that other countries and even for ourselves that we have to learn is that tourism is an area that is easily affected by several factors. And in terms of political and economic instability, it affects the tourism sector. So we, according to the Zimbabwe Statistics Office, there was a 40% decline of tourists coming to Zimbabwe in 2001. Because that was the peak of the political and economic controversies surrounding Zimbabwe. So that shows that this is really vulnerable to these instabilities. And I mean, nowadays with the geopolitical issues, we need to learn from this. But as I said, I think in terms of tourism in general, Zimbabwe on the path to recovery. This started somewhere in 2009, but it has not been a smooth sailing to 2025, as shown by this graph. And I think if you look at this graph, you see that from 1996, there's been a up and down shift in tourist arrivals in Zimbabwe, which I think indicate very clearly the issues I've been talking about, that tourism is very vulnerable to the shifting statistics in Zimbabwe. For example, we know exactly what that the dips in the diagram are connected to certain events. For example, the first dip in 1997 that coincide with the first issues related to land reform and so forth and so on. So that this diagram, I think, should be taken to an analysis of this diagram definitely indicates the issues that can affect tourist arrival. And tourist arrivals means local tourists also affected. And of course, in 2021, we can see a huge dip connected, of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic. But as I said, tourism in Zimbabwe is on the rise. This year, this is something that many Zimbabweans are proud of. Zimbabwe was voted by tourism experts to be the #1 place to visit in 2025, which is something that would not have been thought of 20. Learning here is that nothing remains the same. We, especially in tourism, there are ups and downs, and there's always an as we are experiencing there. Then the other lesson I think that we can draw from this, and the other area where we can draw lessons from Zimbabwe is in terms of the change in demography of the people who are visiting. This is just in general tourism of the country. In the past, unfortunately, we don't have very strong statistics for the 1980s, the 1990s, but the current statistics of the demography of people who are visiting, where they are from, it shows there is definitely a
5
clear
minutes.
change.
Ancila,
All
5
right.
minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'm almost done. There's definitely a change in demography, where we see that most of our tourists in Zimbabwe are coming from Africa and the Americas and Asia in 2024, and Europe. Obviously, Asia, China is contributing a lot to that. In a way, as Europe has gone down the ladder, but in the 1990s, Europe was the topmost area where we got our tourists. In terms of demography, again, and something else that we have seen as Zimbabweans is that the domestic market is king in especially if you want to stabilize the up and downs in the tourist market. So from 2009, the Zimbabwe has targeted growth in domestic market, and it shows that it's really growing. There is a campaign that started way back called Zimbo, which promotes movement of domestic market, of domestic tourists, and it has been going up. The statistics from 2016 up to the present shows a rise, an annual rise, continual annual rise of domestic tourism. And in terms of places, this is something else that I think we need to when we are planning the tourism, local tourism, we need to know where people are going so that we can also plan where to develop, which sites to develop. And in Zimbabwe, most people are coming to Harare and Victoria Falls and Blaawai. Then we have those that are going there. So we need to use these statistics to develop particular packages for tourists. So in conclusion, I think lessons learned that we really, in this digital age, we need to utilize analytics to know exactly where to develop, which areas to develop. We also need to balance conservation and tourism. Obviously, because we have declining budgets for conservation, we need to raise money in other ways, and tourism is one of the ways that we can do that. Also, we need to focus when we look at developing tourism, we need to focus on both foreign and domestic. The dip in Zimbabwean tourism, especially international tourism, because of travel warnings and so on, really affected tourism, and it led to neglect of a lot of local sites. But if there was a balance with domestic tourism, it probably would not have failed as much as it did. Education, we need to provide literature on rock art, and I think this is lacking. We also need to look at
1 minute, Ancila.
Narrative. All right.
1 minute to conclude.
Sure, thank you. Then we need a plan on resilience, integration of rock art tourism with other attractions. Those are the lessons. I think this is repeated. So I think in conclusion, I can say that a sustainability for future for rock art tourism is to integrate it with other things, and obviously to not concentrate on just preservation, but also raise, integrate it with tourism, other tourism resources. Thank you. I acknowledge the organizers, the hosts, and all the participants who are listening to me, and of course my institution, the University of Zimbabwe. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you may go ahead. Thank you.
Alors, I think in order to avoid any echo, Ancila, you have to cut your mic. The time I'm taking the question in the room here, and then I'm cutting the mic here, and you can open your mic and answer. Any question?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for your presentation. I've got one comment or one additional information that I would like to ask to you. There's a slide at the end of your slideshow that said that, quote, Minister, if I understood well, that said that there should be some way in the next Heritage Act to facilitate Zimbabwean tourism in Zimbabwe. If you can tell us a bit more about it. And also, your conclusion states quite clearly that the situation is pretty dramatic. So, because you're saying that rock art sites is arrived to a situation that it has to provide tangible benefits in order to be preserved. So that means it's either commodified or destroyed. Isn't there some kind of a third way?
Okay, thank you. Can I go ahead and answer?
Yes.
Sorry, yes, I didn't quite get the first part. Okay, but I will answer the second.
So the first comment is regarding one slide of your show at the end of it. There's a quote from a politician saying that there should be a way to facilitate Zimbabwean tourism in Zimbabwe by changing the Heritage Act. Probably like 4 or 5 slides before the end.
All right, I get that. Okay, so in that the tourism, I think, as I said, the tourism in general, not just in terms of rock art or archaeology, has been so it's an act that we inherited from the colonial period, and it has not been changed so much. So what she was referring to is that since our focus is to drive domestic tourism, there are some sections in there that should be improved in order to drive domestic tourism and enable people. It says we need to amend the tourists to make it easier for families and individuals. to travel, explore, and experience the Zimbabwean experience. So it's because the tourism act that we inherited from long back was so focused on attracting external tourists rather than domestic tourists. So they want to make it more friendly to domestic travelers. I guess that is what he's referring to there. Then, in terms of the commercialization of rock art sites, this is I
Sorry,
believe
just
okay.
regarding the first question, just wanted to know if you got any more details to say about how can they attract Zimbabwean tourism by using the Heritage Act. So if you got any ideas already how it's going to be implemented.
I'm not very sure, but I guess they wanted to maybe reduce tariffs so that it's affordable to locals. Maybe, for example, I know for sure that they've included some rebates for tourists, for people who invest in tourism, so that they can reduce the cost. Because in most cases, domestic tourists, especially in Zimbabwe, in a volatile economy, it is mostly because of the cost that you use and you have that will impede your travel. So something like that, but I think it's an interesting area that I can look at to see what they've done and what they've proposed, because I think it's still a bill that they should go through Parliament. But I think those are some of the areas that they wanted to work on.
Thank you.
Okay. So I can move on to the next question.
Yes, another question? Sorry. Yes, please answer to the second question. Sorry.
All right. So the second question was whether we are commodifying this the rock art. I think this is an issue of great debate, even amongst many groups, that if we are making money out of heritage like rock art, are we commodifying it, or are we making it sustainable? So as I showed, there's money in terms of looking after the heritage. Money is resources have mostly been coming from the government to support that. But with the different experiences that we have had, we realize that it's not sustainable for heritage practitioners to depend on just government money. And I think this is something that many post-colonial countries would experience. And it is probably unavoidable that you need to generate money from other sources. And I believe that tourism may be one of sustainable ways of doing that. So that's my position, but I know it's it's something that people have many ideas, opposing ideas for. Thank you.